I just realized. Okay, so this is a great start of the stream, but that's okay. There we go. Yes. All right. Well, we are now ready to get started. All right. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I already see some of you are there. Please leave your messages in the chat if you want to ask or request some questions. As always, I'm Bonsert of Radio Retrofuture, and today with me is Carvid Priest of Chase the Dark. Hello, sir. How are you doing there in the dark?
Very well, thank you. Yes, I am a bit in the dark tonight, aren't I? It was
Yes.
crazy because about 10 minutes ago the sun was beaming through here and it was really bright. So always the way this time of year.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
it's gone. But I'm happiest in the dark. So
Ah, yes. Yeah, because I realized that we already had some history. We contacted each other like a few years back now, I think, for Radio Retro Future for Fallout about a radio station I made, which is still on YouTube. But if you want to hear the complete radio show, you have to go to BitChute because YouTube banned some of those radio programs. Anyway, but yeah, and that was because of a song, which is also happens to be one of my favorite like steampunk themed songs. What's it? What was it called again? I all of a sudden forgot the
oh,
name.
was that with my previous band Metropolis?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Oh gosh, we had quite a few. So there was my Metropolis. There was All the Machines,
That's also
Siren.
included. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, lots and lots of them. I'm sure everybody can remember them, but
Yeah,
I can
or am
remember
I
them
now
well.
confusing them with another band? Oh man, I mean, I spoke to so many people. I think I'm now
I'm
mixing you
sure.
up with somebody else as well. But today we're gonna talk about because I did get some people who responded to that song Metropolis. So that was fun. That was a bit more. What was it? Bit punk rock metal ish. How would you describe that?
It was. We always like to think of it as sort of retro future bother boy kind of thing with a sort of killing joke edge to it, and we were always big fans of the Clockwork Orange, hence the bowler
Mm.
hats that we wore. We always wanted to appear similar but different, so we always had a uniform that we would wear, and we would turn up at the gigs in those as well. So it got to the stage where people would know we were there because someone would shout out, "Metropolis is here!" and
Nice.
uh, and we liked that. We liked the fact that people knew that we would turned up. We hadn't sort of hidden in some van at the back and then got ready. We were ready to go as soon as we got out of the van
Nice.
and got up to all sorts, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about you and who is Corvid Priest. How did it all get started for you?
I've always wanted to be in music, but I never had any talent to do any music. So I was never sort of made to thump the keys of a piano when I was growing up and stuff like that, even though I really wanted to. But I had a father who was made to play piano via the ruler method, which is every time you get something wrong, you get hit on the hand with a ruler. So he didn't want to put me through that. So I was never pushed into doing any musical instruments. And I'm one of those people that kind of needs to be pushed into things at an early age. But the first thing I did when I got to university was buy a guitar. And I taught myself in my own room while I was at university how to play, and got in a band while I was at uni there with some friends of mine. We most famously wrote a song called "Bag on My Head," which is become folklore in the West Country now, and it still gets requested at various events
Oh,
even
really?
today. So yeah, it's very silly, but it's quite famous in those neck of the woods, which is the west coast of England, whereas I now live on the east coast of England. So occasionally I get down there to do that. But I was an actor originally,
Oh,
and I was in theatre for many years. I did a lot of leading roles, thankfully, in musicals and plays. Did a bit of Shakespeare as well. I've been Richard III, and I've been Romeo and Juliet, and I've been
interesting.
in Twelfth Night as well. So I have a quite classical training on the stage. And then I moved into film and television, so was in some movies and TV stuff, and got bored essentially waiting around. Because if you're an actor in TV, as they will all tell you, most of it is hanging around, reading books and
Mm-hmm.
listening to the
Mm-hmm.
radio and picking your nose, essentially. So, um, but I could see that the technicians were busy all day, so I moved behind the camera and became a cameraman and editor. So that's kind of what I do day to day now. And then did some sort of theatre alongside my job, and then gave that all up when I was asked to be in a band, and that band was Metropolis. So it took a long time for me to be in a band, as it were. But I managed that band for about 8 years, and took us as high as we could. And then, unfortunately, our relationship amongst the band kind of imploded a bit, and I decided to go out and do my own stuff. So I wasn't able to write my own music for Metropolis. We had a songwriter, and so I decided to have a go. I'd never written any songs before, other than a few things I'd done at college, and wanted to have a go and see where that would put me. So the music that I write for Chasing the Dark is done under my own terms at home. I write it, I record it, I mix it, master it, and produce it and put it out there. So it's very much a one-man band, as it were. Although occasionally I do have a vast array of exceptional musicians I can call upon if ever I do something with a bigger stage, because it's really quite intimidating being on a massive stage and not having a band behind you. So I have a selection of people that I can call upon who very gratefully I'm able to call upon them to help me out. And we did a gig a couple of years ago before COVID happened, and we met on the day we were doing the gig. So the whole lot of us together. It was the first time we were ever together. Everybody had learnt their bits separately at home, and when we got together, we were all a bit scared that it wasn't going to go very right. But after about the first 3 bars of the first song, we went, "Oh yeah, this is going well."
Wonderful, wonderful.
And we gave a great gig. So yeah, it's kind of a bit weird in the fact that you're not there with another bunch of people, working stuff out, but it's also a relief in the fact that there's not another bunch of people sitting there telling you can't do that and you can't do that, and that's not good enough.
Yeah.
So it swings and roundabouts. I do still have a relationship with Metropolis, and we are still in discussions about various bits and pieces. So I wish them well, and who knows, sometime in the future there may be a gig that I sing with them again in. But at the moment, Chasing the Dark is where my creative juices are flowing, and I'm so excited actually because I've just written a new song, and it's quite different from the others. It's about 8 minutes long, but it's got a full sort of story inside it. But I can't tell you anything about it because it's not quite finished yet. But it's very exciting, so I'm hoping people will enjoy that once I'm able to release it.
Yeah. Well, I was once told that when people start talking about their stories, they're done writing them. So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I myself, I'm always very hesitant to talk about my own writings as well until they're done. But
Yes, because I mean, you do a lot of writing, don't you? So I'm an amateur in comparison with you.
Well, I just finished my first novel. I'm currently in the stage of getting some beta readers to give feedback on it, so I can make like the amendments, and then I'm going into the course of getting it to publishers. I think I might have a few, but you never know. But initial responses have been very positive, so I'm really. Yeah, that's an adventure. That's something all new to me, so I'm a bit intimidated by that, which I guess is a nice topic. What when you went into music, what was the most intimidating thing for you?
When I went into music, it was kind of everything. The only thing I really knew how to do was to sing, because I'd done a lot of sort of West End style musicals. So that was one thing that I've been able to, if I had a talent, that was it. So I was able to say I could sing. But I'd never been in a band before. When I before that, I'd watched Spinal Tap, the famous movie, thinking, God, that's utterly ridiculous. And then I was in a band and realized it's all true, you know. So
They're
it's
actually they were. I wasn't. I'm not sure if they were sued, but they were accused of parodying like existing bands, like stories they told, and like a lot of the scene, like there's this scene of them that they're lost behind stage and they have to ask the janitor where they need to go, and it's like, oh, and they're lost, and meanwhile like people are waiting in front of the stage, and they're lost, and there was I'm not sure what band it was, but someone sued them for that, like, yeah, that was our story. uh,
But
so
yeah, you can't make it up though, can you? I mean, it had to have happened in reality, otherwise you'd never
Oh
think it
yeah.
was so ridiculous. But yeah, all of those things happened, and I was very much grateful for the whole experience. So, you know, that crowding into the back of a truck and driving across the country 300 miles to go to a gig in the freezing cold, and having no heating in the van, and that whole
Mm.
thing. You know, recently I found out the story about the Beatles when they were doing much the same, traveling from one town to another. And there was one night in which it, the windscreen got cracked, and the driver, who was ex-military, he punched the screen out so he could see where he was going. It was
Oh
snowing, very, very cold,
God.
and what the Beatles had to do was lay on top of each other, right, until
Oh
the person at the
God.
bottom, or the person at the top, got so cold that they then moved to the bottom. And that's how they got home. And they drove all the way back from London to Liverpool like that. I think that was an absolutely brilliant story.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
in Metropolis, we decided that we'd light candles in the back of the van, so that we could stay warm. This was when we had the split van, so two of
Mm.
us, three of us could go in the front of the van, and two of us in the back of the van. But there was nothing in the back of the van; it was just the back of a van. So we would sit on the floor, and we'd have these candles, and we'd hope that they wouldn't slide across the floor. And we were sort of sitting there around sort of four little tea lights, hoping that that would keep us warm. But of course, there was wax all over the place by the time we finished, and it was a bit of a laugh, and we nearly went up in flames. But it's all part of that rock and roll thing, you know. There's
Oh yeah.
nothing quite like it, you know. There's nothing quite like it. Waking up in a tent in the middle of a field after a gig, hungover, to find out that the entire field has got a frost on it that is, you know, an inch thick. And the reason you were a bit cold last night in your sleeping bag was the fact it was minus 15, you know.
Well, I remember there was like outrage about a certain artist like making this money for like a 2 hour performance,
Yeah.
and then they like calculated what he earned per minute and things like that, but only those 2 hours. People do not realize like all the stuff that goes in in the background. I mean, when we go to events with our costume group, it's like the whole week you're like mentally preparing for this thing. You have the pack the cards, get the car ready, make sure that the car is gassed and the tires are okay and everything. And then you need to get there, and then you need to get back. And when you arrive at 2 a.m. in at night, and yeah, in some cases you still need to go to work the next day. So
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, yeah, that was much like it. But actually, you know, what we've been through in the last sort of 18 months has meant that we've forgotten all about that, and we've
yeah,
forgotten
oh
what it was
god,
like.
yes.
So, you know, playing online live streams and things like that is completely different. But I have to say, as much as you go through hell trying to get there and get back again, it's the best feeling in the world, and I can't wait to start doing things again.
Oh yeah, I mean it's gonna be like very weird. I happen to have like a job interview this Monday,
Oh,
and yeah,
best
and
of
I
luck.
yeah. Well, I didn't get the job, but I might get something better. It was a bit like I might be out of a job in a month, so let's do it just in case. Kind of deal, but I was offered something better in the meantime, so we'll see how that turns out. But you come to the office, there's no one there because everyone is working from home, and you're then invited into this room, and like there's like these glass panes in the middle of the table, and you're like, oh god, it's this. It was reminded of these scenes in movies where people, imprisoned stalk through the glass at each other. It's like, I've been working like from home for nearly 2 years now. It's like, and first you're like, oh, it's a luxury, and then the epidemic hit, and you're like, oh no, this is the new normal now, and it would appear it's gonna stay that way even after the epidemic is over.
Yeah.
Um, well, what do you think that will mean for people who perform live when the bars and stuff open again?
I think you're going to see a lot of really good bands in that first couple of months getting out there, because I think everybody's been desperate to do gigs, and I think
Hmm.
so you're going to find that actually if you're a music lover and you like live music, you're going to be able to see a hell of a lot of amazing bands back out there in the scene again, because we just haven't been able to do it. You don't know what you're going to miss until it's taken away from you. And then I think a lot of bands who perhaps hadn't gigged for a while anyway have suddenly gone, do you know what? I think I want to be out there gigging. There's nothing worse
Hmm.
than having somebody tell you you can't go and do something to make you want to do it. So actually,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I think we're going to be blessed with the most amazing gigs over the next sort of year or so. Yeah, certainly.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly from the smaller scale, from my side of things, we are starting to talk to each other again about how we can, mount events, how we can get things going again, and how the festivals that I usually do are starting to do it. Because I've missed 2 years of festivals. I was booked in 2019. I'm now booked in 2021 for the same festival, and we haven't done it yet. So
God.
it's an interesting way of going about things. But I think people are going to be a bit nervous at first at going back to an event where
Hmm.
you're very close to each other.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to hear that the gigs that have been being used as test beds to see what the infection rates have been like have been so positively receiving very little infection. So,
Hmm.
but I mean, I can only really speak for the UK because I'm
Yeah.
sort of stuck here in the UK. I don't know what it's like there over there. How's things in
Yeah,
Holland?
well, quite frankly, because I've been inside so much, I barely know what's going on around me, to be honest. And I've always been an introvert, so it's not that much has changed for me. But even I am like, oh my god, this is getting too much. So I mean, personally for me, I've used the opportunity because we don't have events either, which is kind of like, okay, it's relaxed, I could focus on my novel, which I did, fortunately. And yeah, I've done a lot of writing. That's most definitely true. Not making that many videos anymore, but I did, for the people who are interested, I did finish a audio book for the second channel, a story by Mark Brandon, who was that nice to lend me one of his short stories. So if you want me to uh, uh, listen to a steampunk audio book, because usually I do SCP videos, you can now do so on the second channel. And if you know writers who would be interested in sharing their stories with me, let me know. Yeah.
Oh, I do know a few actually. Yeah, and I'll let them know about that. That
Oh,
would
yeah.
be
Yeah, please
very
do. Please
useful.
do.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So
And
what made you want to start up writing then? What made you? Is this if this is your first novel? Is writing something you've always done and you've just decided now I'm going to focus on a novel, or was it the opportunity that COVID gave us to sit down and have some
um,
time?
well, it's something that I've tried. It started that I was in not a great place in my life at the time, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I visited a lifestyle coach, as they're called, and yeah, and I'm also a dyslexic, so and I
Same here,
did
mate. Yeah, don't worry.
university. Yeah, yeah, I did university, but like every time it was like the writing was the problem, and I recently finished another module, and again the writing remains the problem. For some reason, English works better for me. I don't know if it's the order of the words, but for some reason, English just is more logical to my mind, or maybe it's because it's not my first language that my brain. Because what my brain does, like I'm not a full dyslexic, I have dyslexic tendencies. My brain basically turns every word into an image, so when I'm not paying attention, it just turns a word into an image of a word that is very similar. Or
Yes.
in this case, written correctly. So yeah,
Oh,
my
that's strange. I mean, English is fantastic for stealing words from other languages as well, and I think that's kind of why it's proved
that
so
is true.
popular.
It's a
Is the
very
fact that it is everybody's language all mixed together into a different form, really.
I guess
So
that's true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
it's
recently I learned that American English is actually purer English than British English, because it is
I
made.
would, yeah, I could well believe that. Apart from the spelling, obviously, because
Well,
with the spelling,
apparently, well,
our spelling comes from Latin and Greek and all
mhm.
of the European languages and the Celtic and stuff like that, and that's why it seems a bit odd. And the
Mhm.
Americans have done the absolutely brilliant thing of actually spelling them correctly to how they sound. So
Mhm.
although it does rile the
Well,
British up, I have to say.
apparently in British English it is the case that the S and Z difference between English and American is because the English got poisoned by the French. So enjoy.
I could well believe that. I could
Yeah.
certainly well believe that. Yeah,
So
yeah. No, it's
that's.
there's the weird thing about British English is the fact that it does have this history. It has this amazing history that has shaped the language over the years, and American English is just part of that history. It's and we will see exactly the same thing happening in China as China starts to speak English more often. In
Mhm.
fact, I've heard of Chinese English phrases which are
Japanese
new to the
too. Yeah.
English language, and every country that adopts it, um, and when we had a big influx of people coming into the country from the old empire, so when we had people coming in from India and Pakistan and from the Caribbean, our language blossomed even more with some of the things that they had taken and changed the language into different things. So, it's a growing language. It's not
Hmm.
the French very much like to keep the language as it is. It's got to be done the right way, and this is that. And I absolutely applaud them for that. But I think the British or English, as it were, I'm not going to say British English, but English as a language itself, just goes and morphs all the time into new words and new things and new ways of expressing human emotions, and I think that's really why it's proved so successful.
Hmm.
Interestingly, talking about the English language, I do musical theatre with a chap called Clive Nolan, who anybody who's into prog rock over that's listening will understand that he's one of the main songwriters from Arena, which is a massive neo prog band in the world, and also Shadowlands and various other ones as well, and Pendragon. So he's written some musicals. He always wanted to write some musicals. He's a graduate of the Royal College of Music when he was very young, and they are steampunk musicals, which is
Yep.
fantastic. One called Alchemy, and the other one called King's Ransom, and they're part of a trilogy of stories. We're hoping to get the third one up and running, but obviously uh, the COVID hit. So yeah, and believe me, having a name Corvid and then having something coming out called COVID was I
It
couldn't
does
believe
sound
it.
like a bit of a meme at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, but thankfully somebody managed to find a misspelling of COVID that said COVID testing over here, but actually what it said on the motorway sign was Corvid testing over here. So I've adopted that as my banner for life. I think that's just
Okay.
fantastic. But for those of you that don't know, a corvid is part of the crow family. So
Right.
so I'm a priest of crows, really. So it's which sort of features into my sort of steam goth, uh, aesthetic that I have within Chasing the Dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, I was talking about the things that we do with Clive. Um, he has a fan base all over the world, and they come to see his shows from all over. I mean, when we did the musicals in Cheltenham at the Playhouse Theatre a couple of years ago, we had people flying in from Chile, from Brazil, from Holland, from France, from Poland, from Russia, from Norway, from Sweden, and from all over the world. They were all coming in, and we all know each other now. We've all become friends, and we all go out for coffees and things like that before the shows start. And the one thing that we had to admit is that isn't it nice that English exists as a language around the world, because we can all talk to each other as friends,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
really showed the power that it has around the world. You know, forget the history and what have you. It's nice that there is a language that is adopted throughout the world without taking away anybody's identities of their own language, that we can sort of jump into
Oh yeah.
and converse.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't like talk with people all over the world if that wasn't the case. Once I finally managed to get like a conversation with an Indonesian student about interesting movement in Indonesia, which is kind of retrofuturistic.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, we have not really we talked about a lot of stuff which I really enjoy. But let's talk a little bit about like Chasing the Dark. Like I listened to some of the songs you sent me. It's completely not my genre of music that I usually listen to, so it's very hard for me to make statements about it. But maybe you can explain to our audience to what you do and where do you get your inspiration from.
Oh, okay. Well, at first I was obviously scared when I came out of Metropolis that people would know me for that kind of music. So
Mm.
that was where I started with the first songs, like Progress for Life, that was originally written for Metropolis, but we didn't take that up. So I thought, well, I can do something with this, so I will do this as my first song. But my love of music goes back a very, very long way, right to the cradle, really. And I was very lucky in the fact that my parents had quite a diverse range of musical styles that I grew up listening to. So, you know, it wasn't just the Carpenters and ABBA when I was growing up. That shows how old I am. But it was, you know, lots of other things brought in from different places and from around the world. And um, you know, I was a big fan of Paul Simon's Graceland's album. But I didn't realize before that I was a big fan of Neil Diamond's um, Taproot manuscript album, which is, of course, the very first Western album to include African beats and African styles in. So we all think about it as you know, Paul Simon's amazing Gracelands, which brought the sound of Africa to the masses, but actually Taproot manuscript, which, you know, if you know it, you really do know it. If you don't know it, you'll go, oh, I don't think I've heard of that album. But it was his biggest selling album of all time. And he really, you know, he wasn't singing Sweet Caroline on it. He was singing really interesting stuff. And so it really sort of, in my psyche, has always been the what can I do to make things more interesting? And then I got into Peter Gabriel, and the sort of the neo prog kind of side of things, because it was interesting stuff. Musically, it was very interesting. Lots of information going on, very well mixed, very well produced, and yet saying something quite profound without necessarily being too literal about it. But I also got a bit of a roots in rock and. You know, I liked all the classics, but I was also a big fan of Robert Palmer growing up in the 80s and early 90s. That he was a big influence on me as well, in the fact that he could blend kind quite raucous blues and rock together into something that seemed quite testosterone fueled. I kind of liked that in my formative years when, you know, us chaps are being pumped with testosterone by our bodies, to have something that really lets you let go and be a bit arrogant about stuff and what have you. He always had that bit of a walk that was a bit of a, you know, a swagger that I always liked. And so
I'm trying to recall the name of the band. I'm really bad at names today, but they made a song Land of Confusion.
yes, that's right. That's Genesis. Yeah.
Genesis, yeah,
Yeah. Which is where Peter Gabriel came from originally.
yeah,
So
that's right, Peter Gabriel. Yeah,
yeah. So he started that band, and then the drummer, Phil Collins, took over. So it was, but I was, you know, I was a bit young for the early Genesis. And I have since, you know, working with Clive and working with the prog people community, that has really, you know, opened my eyes to that earlier stuff from them. But what I liked is the fact that he just seemed to have some creativity. He didn't want to define how his music was going to be, you know, and that's what I want for Chasing the Dark. I don't want people to say, oh, he's going to use the same guitars this time and he's going to use the same synth licks or whatever. I want every time you open or listen to a Chasing the Dark song to go, oh, that's a bit different. Wasn't expecting that. Wasn't expecting to go that way. So I've got lots of influences from folk, lots of influences from rock and blues, lots of influences from metal. and trying to blend those all. And I'm a huge Gary Newman fan as well, so I was exactly the right age to hit the sort of the synth wave when it first happened back in sort of 1978, 79, and through to the early 80s. So I love those old analog synthesizer sounds, and I love sort of arpeggiators and things like that, which I've never been able to kind of get my hands on, and it's only in this, because they were so expensive. It's only in these modern times where you can download a free virtual instrument from from somewhere online that gives you access to those kinds of sounds. So instead of having to sell half your house to pay for a synthesizer, I've got access to be able to use those sounds now. And I've over the years just tried to find as many interesting sounds as I can that I think I can use in music. And I'm only just scratching the surface at the moment. So I'm still very excited about what's going to come next, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed because I had Victor and the Bully on not that long ago, and Matt was also like, because like now has like the Victor and the Bully, but he also has like his own electric time bomb, which is more focused on neo swing, because he was afraid that Victor and the Bully would become too much of the same. Which, well, I mean, it works for a lot of bands. I mean, I love Sabaton, which is, well, they're big. I love them, but I mean, all their songs are kind of similar. But yeah, no, they're my favorite bands currently active, I think. But I must say my taste in music isn't that diverse, to be honest. But yeah, it's like the steampunk scene for some reason seems to attract a lot of artists that have this very particular taste and arrangement of songs you don't, or at least I'm of course not familiar with every subculture, so I might be wrong, but it's almost a thrift shop of music. It's very peculiar.
For me, it's the only genre out there at the moment that is really still experimenting musically, because there's no such thing really as steampunk music. And I know somebody will probably say that that's wrong. There isn't really. I mean, even if you look at, the starting of it with Vernian Process and stuff like that, you compare them to Steam Powered Giraffe or Victor and the Bully or Alice's Night Circus or BB Black Dog or Metropolis, you're not going to get the same music in any of those.
Yeah.
So that's what drew me to it. When we got together as Metropolis right at the beginning, I sort of said, well, what kind of music are we going to be doing? And they said, well, it's kind of retro, kind of future-y thing. And I just stupidly said to them, oh, steampunk then. And I know that because I worked in films and we used steampunk as a design ethic, for creating these wonderful worlds. And we went, oh, I wonder if they've got any steampunk music out there. We didn't know. We had no idea it existed. And we did a bit of searching and we found it. And what a fantastic community it was, So we were very kindly sort of thrown into, BB Black Dog, Birthright, Gladstone, all of those amazing bands. And then, then seeing the next bunch of people coming through like Alice's Night Circus and Victor and the Bully. Victor and the Bully, I believe their first gig was with us as Metropolis, So, and I remember that night very, very well. And I've come to be very good friends with them ever since. So it's so nice to seeing it grow. And, Alice's Night Circus went off, did a gig over in the Far East.
I still need to have her on the show at some point.
Yeah. And over in America as well, Victor and the Bully are backwards and forwards with Monty doing all of those bits and pieces. So, we're able to sort of stand up and say, the steampunk music scene here is very, very good and it's very diverse. And if you're sick to death of either going to see the same old band doing the same old greatest hits album over and over and over again, or you're sick to death of the modern dance-based, French electric dance-based stuff that we see in the charts, or or rap and hip hop, but you want to see something that's blending all of the great music genres together. And I mean, you'll find rap in there. You've got chap hop, You've got the Professor, Professor Elemental doing that,
Yeah.
So there is something for everybody in it. But if you're
Mhm.
into music and you're not sort of stymied into this whole affair of, oh, I don't listen to that because that's not cool, or I don't listen to that because it's just not me, and you want to have an interesting evening of music, then I would say go to a steampunk gig because
Mhm.
really you're not going to get the
Well,
same sort of
yeah.
creativity anywhere else.
I mean, the radio show that I made all those years ago that I discontinued, is that, I mean, all these gamers who had no idea, they would never look for this type of music. And it's like it has like medieval inspired music, it has like jazzy, it has like punk, it has, the first song is metal by Marco's old band, the
Yeah,
Clockwork Opera,
yeah.
who also still makes music sometimes for this channel as well. He's on our Discord. He's doing very well, by the way. He's like now making movie music and stuff. He's doing great. Yeah, I mean, it has everything: metal, punk, rap. Mr. B also contributed some songs.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's amazing what's on there, and a lot of people, wow. Then I think some band from Czech wrote me like, oh wow, we now got like fans in Canada, and Pretorius Horde wrote me like, oh, we now have fans in Russia, because all these gamers, they play Fallout 4, they're like, oh, a music station, whatever, Radio Retrofuture, and then it's like. So that's really fun to see. I would still like to make a new radio station more in the theme of my current universe. Um,
Yeah, you
but
should. You should.
yeah,
It's the
well,
more that we can get the stuff out there, the better, I think. And it's the trouble with being in a small or relatively small but growing subculture is getting it out there. And when
yeah,
you're fighting against, certainly from the music side of things, when you're fighting against the big corporations who aren't interested, they're interested in making a quick
yeah.
buck from something that's tried and tested already. But the one thing that I did notice, I used to lecture at a university in Cambridge, and my students who had never heard of steampunk were fascinated by it all. And it was amazing. I didn't say much about it. I just said what I did and what band I was singing with. But they all went and looked it up and they were like, why do we not get to hear about this stuff? This is great. So there was, they did start to sort of send it all around and start talking
Yeah,
about it.
well, I have a theory about why that is, and I meant this is an opinion I've voiced before, because one thing, and it also comes into like all the creativity that you talked about, that in the end that steampunk is like a community made by its creators. It's not like Star Wars, that's a franchise now owned by Disney, and Disney pays like influencers in the community to promote Star Wars. And the same goes for all these other subcultures. Like cosplay is fans dressing up as their favorite characters from a movie. They don't make them up themselves. And okay, that sounds maybe a bit too negative, but I mean, all these groups, like they all have like their corporate interests that fund these groups. But the steampunk community, like it's all created like it's basically just creators making stuff, and
Yeah.
and the people who like that stuff. And I
I
I
was amazed at the quality of the art and the we haven't talked about the markets yet and the stuff, the clothing and
yeah.
the artwork and the sculpture and the modeling and all of this stuff is exquisite quality
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and markets are incredible, and I'm always blown away by the quality of
Mhm.
the merchandise that's being sold.
Yeah. Well, allow me to vent. I do wish that the Steam community took a little bit better care of its creators, gave them a little bit more credit. That is something that, and I heard this a lot of people who were like, yeah, oh, we make all this stuff, and oh yeah, people think it's great, but they don't support us on any platforms really. And yeah, it does concern me, that a lot of creatives are leaving for that reason. Like some of them said, you should do other things than steampunk, because, well, it's true, my channel does not grow. barely. And compared to my other channel where I do SCP videos, which is also, I must say, that is also a community of creators. Although they're, which is basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's a community of people who also write stories. That's kind of what I want to emulate with my short stories. One ambition of mine is to get somebody to write a song about one of the characters or something that they in particular like of that universe. So that's also an ambition of mine. But it's I get like a lot of comments from those guys, like, "Oh, I don't get why the SCP community is not supporting you more. Oh, can you please make more content?" I never get those comments from steampunks.
The difficulty with a community built of creatives is that we're all creating stuff, so we're all trying to sell our own stuff.
Yeah,
and
it is.
that's the hardest thing, is the fact that you need somebody who what happened in the 50s and the 60s was that some people who weren't creatives came along and said, you know what, I think I can make some money out of this. I'm going to start supporting it. And I don't think people think that they can, but I think every new family that I've seen go into a steampunk market and come out absolutely mind blown with having spent 50 quid on something that they never thought they wanted, but now they do.
Yeah.
But you do see it sort of. I mean, when we first started with Metropolis, there was this real vibe that this was going to be the next big thing. You could actually feel the tension in the air that suddenly this was going to break mainstream and we were all going to be, millionaires and diving into our guitar-shaped pools in LA, but it didn't happen. But it could, and it still could. I still think steampunk is one of those subcultures that's just waiting in the wings, and it just needs somebody with deep pockets to come in and go, do you know what? This stuff is different, and it's going to blow people's minds. And I think you'll find that will probably come from somewhere that's not in the West. You'll probably find that China will take hold of it, or India will take hold of it, and it will be huge over there. And we'll end up doing gigs over there, But I think the West seems to have kind of lost interest in anything that doesn't make them a quick buck.
Well, that's one thing, but I think that because everyone is so used to, let's say, the Star Wars franchise, right? And that they'll, I will also respond to a comment by Senior02. Can you please make more content? Thank you, Senior. To comment on that, like the thing is, and I had a conversation with Mark Brandon, for whom I did the short story on my other channel. And he said, gee, you must put a lot of effort in those videos. I said, yes, and that's a problem because, I have to make choices. Like either I write my novel and my short stories, or I work on videos. I would love to have an editor so I can do the recording of the voices, and then somebody else does the editing, and I could produce more. But I do have people who now help me with research. We're working on a video on Art Nouveau, one of those wonderful, almost forgotten things that I would also like to bring back a little in the Association of Ishtar. So I have this ambitions. And
no, but it's good. I mean, as long as there's things to interest you, it's.
Let me get my grand strategy, what I kind of have in mind.
Your devious plan. Come on, tell me all about your devious plan.
So the idea is that one problem that the steampunk community has, like SCP community, also completely created by its own people. Like they've got thousands of stories. So I kind of would like to see that as well. That's why I have the Association of Ishtar wiki. I want to make it Creative Commons so anyone can either take existing ideas in the universe and make their own story around it, or insert their own idea, and then people can pick or choose if they're going to use it for their own things or not, or consider it canon or not. So that's one thing, and artists have already contributed their own visions of characters and stuff, so that's great. I'd like to get musicians involved as well. We're working on audiobooks in combination with artists, and maybe I can ask somebody to make a background theme or something. But yeah, the idea is that like people start talking about all these ideas and all these characters. But one thing, and this annoys a lot of creators in the steampunk community, why they're all getting like zoomed out on steampunk, like, oh, I can do better for myself if I join that other community or that other franchise, is that I think because everyone's so used to Star Wars and oh, these companies they'll make new movies, and then we'll consume that movie. For steampunk, it doesn't work that way because, well, a lot of steampunks have day jobs because, well, no one is buying their stuff. How often do we hear of vendors, especially in the beginning, like a lot of people like, oh, that's a cool design, I can make that for myself. You know, at their stall. So just somebody coming to your stall and just saying, oh, I'm gonna copy this. So
Well, the other thing about creatives is that it's very easy to steal stuff from another person, and so it's especially in the times that we live today, it's so easy to digitally manipulate something, steal something, and put it out as your own. So I do understand that, and it is it was so much more difficult in the early days to be able to do that. But music's exactly the same. That you can only copyright it so much. I mean, if I know people that are listening to my music that haven't bought it, but I don't give a monkeys about that, really. I just would prefer them to live in, but I don't have to make a living from it because I've got my day job,
Yeah, it's the same for me. Yeah, it's just more that I would like to have more opportunities to make more, and for that's more of the thing. And for that, I'm gonna need financial support. It's that the same goes for you, and. But the thing is that a lot of because people are so accustomed to the big franchises, like, oh, they're gonna make it by themselves. I don't have to give them money for them to make it, or share it or promote it or motivate them, because we're talking also about not just money but also about motivation. Like I have to avoid Facebook and places like that because I post something that I put hours into that I know is great, and then I get like no response, like nothing, especially on places like Facebook. Instagram is way better at that, but anyway. And then you see like somebody posting a selfie and that's like 50 hits, and you're like, what the.
Oh, well, I got it. I think we made a video for Metropolis years ago, and 5 years later, I think we had like 5,000 views, and we were like, "Wow, 5,000 views!" Now my daughter watches a thing where a little girl plays with two Barbie dolls and narrates it, and it's got 3.5 million views in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
It's very difficult to put out art that you hope would be brought out and on a more intellectual level when people are quite happy to watch cats walking along a piano keyboard and grandma bashing into a door and falling into a swimming pool. But it's kind of always been that way. You just have to keep producing and keep staying positive and keep turning up at the events and
stay away from social media.
What I did see in the time that we were with Metropolis was that the events were getting slightly more people coming to them. There were new faces always turning up, and we as Metropolis we diversified into the sort of space rock genre and stuff like that because our music did fit within that kind of thing as well, and we have a fantastic community who support us within that. But and myself as well with Chasing the Dark, it's in a strange way I've kind of diversified as well with the steam goth thing. So I can keep my foot in steampunk and the sonic rock people, but I've also got the gothic genre as well, which is a much larger genre and much greater capacity for ticket sales, as it were, and sales that my music just fits more into that aesthetic. But the great thing is I will always be a steampunk because I know that my music also fits into steampunk, and that's where my heart is, and will always remain so. And I don't know if everybody said it to you. I didn't know I was a steampunk until someone told me, but I've always been one. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's been found with lots of people.
Yeah, exactly. And to respond, kind of like Senior O2's remarks about Bioshock, like that was totally unique. Are you a bit into game history?
I used to be into gaming. In fact, when I lectured in Cambridge, it was on a gaming course. I was teaching 3D modeling and design techniques
Mm.
for the gaming community, and that was fantastic. But I have to say, I have two kids and have family and a job, and the time I get to actually play games now is very, very small. I think I managed to do Sudoku and a sort of solitaire game. I found a little one which is like making bubbles pop and you fill them with ink and it pops. That's a really great game which I found, which I can use on my phone. But actually, when it comes down to consoles and things like that, my last console I bought was a Wii, the original Wii, and we still do Wii Sports with the kids and stuff like that. But that's not good, is it? I mean, I was big fan of Half-Life at the time, a big fan of Call of
Mm.
Duty when that started, and Medal of Honor.
Yeah, yeah.
I've always liked my first person shooters. I've always liked my driving. I used to have a wheel and force feedback and the whole thing for driving games. I'm a big fan of those.
Did you also
Um,
play Bioshock? Asking for a guest.
I haven't played BioShock yet, but my students told me an awful lot about it, and I am aware of it. There were
Hmm.
some other games that I should have known about, which I didn't know about, and they educated me quite well on that. But
Yep.
the great thing is, coming from when I come from, I was able to talk to them about things like Jet Set Willy and Magic Knight and Attic Attack and the things from the days of the Spectrum and the Commodore 64. You see, so I've been very fortunate to be in that generation which came out
I played
as
Amiga 500.
Space Invaders came out and Pac-Man came out and Pong came out and the first people to actually have a games console at home.
Do
So
people still play in arcades these days? I don't know.
I don't know. We have piers in the UK, which sort of a big iron Victorian structure that is essentially a platform that goes out into the
Mm.
sea, and they have arcades on those. And I don't see as many people playing them as used to. I mean, it
Mm.
used to be a packed place when I was growing up. The queue to get on to play Outrun or similar games at the time was, you had to wait half an hour to get your chance. And if you crashed out in the first couple of seconds, then that was it. You were back to the back of the queue. So it's not like that anymore, certainly. And I don't know whether the focus for Konami and games in Sega and things like that is towards the arcades anymore, which I think is sad. But I think, why bother when you can play something, like Assassin's Creed at home on your 4K TV,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all those other bits and pieces. So yeah, it's great. All the phones going in the background. I'm sorry about that.
No, no, that's okay. Yeah, it's times have changed. People don't realize how good they have it. In that regard. And now you can just, in the past, oh, you want to come over to play games? I mean, do people still, well, kind of still do that. We still have party games, so. Um, but yeah, yeah, that's how a lot of children my age developed their social skills. They went over to their friends to play Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing much the same. I remember playing Sega Mega Drives and even
I used to have those.
N64s. We used to play Mario Kart and all of those bits and pieces quite a lot when I was at university. I seem to remember far more than I was actually doing any work. But I just didn't have it at home. I was a PC gamer, you see, so I
Mm-hmm.
moved from the Spectrum straight into the PC world and never
Right,
really
right,
looked
right.
back. And my the great pleasure of my thing was getting a new graphics card so I could make GTA look even better. But it's
Okay. Yeah, and now I'm playing Shadow Empire, which
oh
is like
wow.
which looks like it. Well, it looks a bit more advanced than let's say a Pentium 166 era. That's what the graphics kind of look like.
It's good. I mean, I'm really pleased that they're having an idea to go back to that sort of aesthetic. You know, it's
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of companies, I mean, Shadow Empire like is as they call autistic on how the logistics work, because logistics are like a major part of the game, making sure all your military units are supplied and still in the field, and you got to make sure there are like roads and oh yes, if you can design planes that cannot fly because the atmosphere does not allow for it.
a bit like our helicopter on Mars, isn't it? That's
Yeah, something. Yeah, yeah. It's exactly that idea. It's insane.
I shall have a look. I shall give it a go. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Shadow Empire. It's something, but I must say I enjoy it. Yeah. Yes. So we're approaching the hour mark. So let's go to the final word. I really enjoyed our talk.
Yeah, me too. We
Yeah.
should do it again sometime.
Yes, yes, that's fine. A matter of fact, we talked a little bit about Spinal Tap. Maybe we can do the movie review together on the show, if you like.
Well, I always say that the one irony is that I'm a video maker by trade, and I have never made a video for Chasing the Dark because I don't get any time because I'm too busy making videos for the business that I work for. So it's I hopefully will be able to make a video of maybe the first song 2 years after I actually released the first song. So it's that's the idea. But
All right.
look out for my new single, which will be out shortly. It's going to be 8 minutes, but 8 minutes of great fun and excitement, I hope. It's a
Awesome,
bit of a
awesome.
story, so hopefully people will enjoy it. And if anybody wants to make the video for that, then I'd be very interested to talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
In fact,
No.
actually, any of your friends who do, you know, the games, the way they appropriate the characters within it and then tell the story through the characters in the game. I'm
Hmm.
really interested in having a video made like that.
Yeah,
That would
I
be
would
really.
love to have like one such a video about my world. So that's kind of like what
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to seduce some poor musician to do. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like, but that would at least my hope is that will like bind people to something where they can actually discuss about ideas and like people come back to like, oh, there's more Association of Ishtar, and oh, now there's a song, and now there's so
Yeah,
that's
just building the world out of it. It's exactly what Clive Nolan does and what he's done with his
hmm
world, and very successful. You just got to keep pumping at it, keep putting out the stuff on social media.
yeah.
Find the social media that works for you. It's Instagram, it seems, for you. I'm not really sure what works for me. I'm terrible at Twitter. If
Apparently,
anybody wants to teach me how to use Twitter?
Hort told me that like Facebook has like algorithms. If you post a link to something, it will like downgrade it because they don't want
The algorithm on Facebook is dreadful.
yeah.
It doesn't allow.
So
It
I
only
must
allows
say
one
on
thing.
Minds I get good feedback, even though I don't have much followers there.
Oh,
Um,
right, that's good.
so
That's
it's
good.
yeah, I have a good feeling for Minds. It's just that the platform is dreadfully political because of the current climate. But anyway, let's go to the final word. I always ask my guests, do you have some words of wisdom for the audience before you leave us?
Um, I would say if you're a creative, never try to follow anybody else. Do what you want. Do and once people know that that's what you do, you will find an audience. They will seek you out. Um, Never try to pander. Never look at the charts and think you've got to do that. Just go with your heart, and eventually you'll find an audience, and they will be total fans and will stick with you for life. And that really is the case.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Do I have some
Likewise.
moments? Do I have some news? Well, not really. I tried to make an update video on the novel this Friday. Kind of let you guys know what's going on happening on the channel. Um, I I want to make more audiobooks, but that will be for the second channel. Like I said, the SCP crowd does seem to enjoy what I do, so I'll please them as well. Actually, I did record something. Also, again, if you know steampunk writers who have interesting short stories and they want them recorded, I can record those as well. Because there does seem to be a demand for those. And of course, if you haven't already, please check out the Association of Ishtar. I want to write some new short stories. Again, I've got like a few dozen ideas already in a folder somewhere. But I love to hear what you guys want to read more of, which ideas, which worlds, etc. Yeah, and with that, I think thank you so much for being here, Corvid, and for all you lovely listeners